Hey everybody, welcome back. Thank you for tuning in. This is Stacy, founder and CEO of A Family Affair Productions. I want to thank you for stopping by. This is actually episode 7, and the title is That Was Then, This Is Now. Be able to recognize when seasons change. And oh, let me tell you what a valuable uh, lesson that is to be able to recognize when seasons change. I borrowed the first half of the title from my daughter Naima's favorite author, S.E. Hinton. That was then, This Is Now is actually the sequel to her critically acclaimed book or famous book, The Outsiders, which was actually part of Naima's seventh grade required reading. That was the first book she read last school year, and she's read it 3 times and read a couple of sequels. So that was then, This Is Now. Is a very powerful statement, and something that I think is just as equally important. It goes hand in hand with being able to recognize when seasons change, right? So I've got to give a quick comparison. When my children attended public school, at the end of the school year, I was wiping my brow. I was literally exhausted from having to fight for everybody, from the lunch lady to the superintendent of school districts, just to advocate and to have my children not treated so poorly, to advocate for them in such a way that they felt defended, that they knew I was there for them, and that I understood what was happening was not okay. And I voiced that to them so that they didn't normalize being treated poorly, because it happens, right? We normalize things as they happen. And so I would, at the end of the school year, be exhausted, like, whew, at least I've got the summer. Hopefully, they'll get a little strength. And then I would work on the process of figuring out what it would be for the next school year, right? So school ended in June, late May, early June, and it started back about the second week of August. And so, in that short time period, I would spend all of my time, and especially the closer it got to August, working on materials, supplies, school clothes, the whole nine, daycare, transportation, or if they're going to walk or whatever, right? And so it was never a time for reflection. But as a homeschool parent, things changed. The paradigm changed. When the school year ends, as we did this year, and that is also what I borrowed their title, That Was Then, This Is Now, from a video, an interview that I did with them at the end of the school year. And you can find it on our YouTube page at A Family Affair Productions, LLC. Um, and uh, and it's also on our website at a family affair productions llc.com. And I did an interview with them, like a wrap up, like, because every week we have weekly wrap ups. Well, I have end of the school year wrap ups too. There's a requirement that you have to meet, you have a time frame. I give you the outline of what it needs to look like, and then you go from there and you present it. And so this year, it was for them to be able to talk about their homeschool experience as a whole, to some degree, to summarize it, and then their experience for the school year, right? And so from that moment, after that video, I began to reflect about then what would that was then, this is now, how things have changed over this period of time, from becoming a homeschool parent and even an entrepreneur, how it changed everything, how the world flipped upside down. And what I've come to realize is that things at the time, sometimes, I would do things by necessity, like it was a need. I had no choice or very few choices. It was my best, worst choice, right? And that's the avenue I took. And after a while, even though it didn't fit, it didn't work. And I had to do a lot of improvising to make it work. Over a period of time, I normalized it. And when I should have walked away and done something different, when there was a reprieve and a time to change things, I stuck it out because I normalized it. What do I mean? I'll give you an example. Over 2.5 years ago, that fall of 2019, I was supposed to homeschool my kids. I was so done in June of 2018 with the constant battles at the school district and in the school itself with the teachers and the principal. I was like, you know what? I'm done with this. I can do this. I need to figure this out, right? And then the offer came for me to work for the county. And I said, okay, well, this will change things, right? Working for other people didn't work for me because they owned me. They owned all my time. Being a black female, I had to work my ass off, always trying to protect my reputation. You know, I'm not lazy, I'm not this, I'm not that, right? All these stereotypical things, right? No, I'm not gonna play the mama role of everybody. No, I'm not gonna giggle and smile and, right, leave me alone in my workspace, let me do my work. So it didn't work for me. But I did it for the money. And I don't think I'm the only person who can make that statement that it doesn't work for you, but you do it for the money. Some people do what they love, and that's awesome. Doesn't mean they don't have challenges, but they do it because they love it. Well, I loved organizing because it fit me, and I did it for the money. But it was the long hours I couldn't take. It was the absolute long hours, right? Because I have small children, and somebody else at that time, I had small children, they're teenagers now. Somebody at that time was raising my children. And so when the opportunity came to work for the county, that meant 8 to 5, 8:30 to 5, Monday through Friday, right? And so I thought this will work for me. I found another way. I was improvising. So in the fall, when the time came, my kids didn't have phones because they didn't need phones. They were picked up, they were dropped off, or they walked from the school down to the daycare provider's house, right? In 2019, in January through June, they had been at the daycare providers for about 2 years anyway. And so I went to a phone provider to get phones. Now, these phones are like $1,000 phones, right? iPhones. And then I had to order them and they had to come in the mail. But it worked for me at the time because I didn't have to come out of a ton of money, maybe $250, $300, something like that. So at the time, I made it work. I got them the phones, right? But the problem was I had unlimited data. They only had 1 gigabyte of data to share. And so at that time, I didn't realize what a headache this would be because I figured, okay, well, they'll call me when they get to school because Nasir's going to have to take the bus. Then when he gets off the bus, he'll walk a mile on his own, and Naima will have to leave home. And her school, her elementary school, was really close. And she'll have to walk over. So they can text me when they get there, and then on the way home, same thing. They're on their own. And so at some point, I found a daycare provider who was willing to do pick up and drop off. So I didn't have that worry because I spent a lot of time because I had to be at work at 8:30, but I lived on the other side of town. So, it's the commute, and here the traffic can be horrendous. And so I was a little bit concerned for them, especially with Naima walking on her own. First day of school, Nasir got lost. And so he was on the phone and I was in a training. It was very chaotic. So the phone worked technically because he was able to reach out to other family. The job, the schedule, all these things that I had put in place that I improvised, right, at that time to make it work because it didn't work. None of it worked, but to make it work, right? Well, by the time that December came, I realized that it didn't work at all. So it started out not working, but it didn't work even before that. None of it worked, right? With the school, it did not work. From the time we moved here in March of 2017, I moved here for work. I had 17 days to get it together before my contract date began. And my job was paying for our housing. So I moved out here knowing they would be paying for my housing, but I had 17 days to figure out what I would do about school, about daycare. So that's how I met my daycare provider. And I found a school in the school district. I made it work. I'm sorry, not in the school district, in the district close to my office because we were new here. No family, just the three of us. They were in second and fourth grade, unable to fend for themselves at all. And so I made it work. I found that school. It was close to my job. I was like, okay, cool. I'm enrolling now. And here we are. And it didn't work, but I made it work. Because I'm going to be honest, I needed somebody to keep my kids while I worked that job. And that's what the school was. It just so happens it was close enough to my office. I was able to be a little bit flexible because I was the new person in. Excuse me. And so from that point, it worked until it just didn't work no more, and I had to pull them out the school probably about a week or two before the school year ended, and I came in at the end, so it didn't work very quickly. It started out downhill, with the exception of the ram in the bush, Mr. Peoples, who was the older African American gentleman there, who, if it was not for him being there, I don't think we would have made it, because he watched over my kids. He would text me pictures of them. He would find little stuff that other kids lost, the little fidget spinners, and he would give it to them so they would feel special, right? He was right there. And then we left. And then my daycare provider said, that's great that you're not going to be all the way over there because there's a school closer to me. Put them in school here. And I had to go because they were out of the district. I had to go to the school board and request for them to go to school there. And they gave me the hardest time. It just so happens because I was living in an area and living in shared housing because it was what I could afford when I first got here, that they couldn't deny me under the McKinney-Vento Act, which is that your kid can go to school if you are living somewhere because you can't afford to live in the area, right? Something to that effect. And so it's a homeless school law because technically we were homeless living in shared housing, even though I worked full time, more than full time, even though I made $27 an hour. That is nothing in the Bay Area, nothing. But I made just enough not to qualify for any assistance, right? And so I had to fight my way in. I made it work because that's what a daycare provider was. That was then. But when it was all said and done, 2 years later, that same daycare provider, who was aware that my children have peanut allergies, gave my daughter a cookie with macadamia nuts. And I picked my daughter up. She said her stomach hurt. And the daycare provider looked really nervous, but I didn't know what it was about. And I took my daughter home and I drove the 35 minutes in traffic home. And then she got a little welt on her neck. And I said, what is this? So I gave her what I had left, a teaspoon of Benadryl. And it seemed like when I gave her that, the welts just popped up everywhere. And she was like, Mommy, I'm itching. It was really panicky. And so I looked around and I had some prednisone from when she had an asthma attack I don't know, however, what time it was before that. But I still had some. So I gave her a dose of prednisone. Put her in the shower thinking, I don't know what this is. Then she began to cough. I gave her albuterol, her asthma puffer. And I didn't know what it was and took her to the hospital to find out for her to say. And as the doctor said, well, what did you eat? And she said, I just had a cookie and a Go-Gurt. And he said, well, tell me about that cookie. And because I told him she's had Go-Gurts a million times. He said, well, let's talk about the cookie. And she said it had these little white chocolate chips in it. And I said, honey, those are macadamias, not white chocolate chip. She said, well, daycare provider lady, and I won't say her name, just stuck it in my mouth. She took a bite and then she gave it to me. So the next day, of course, they gave her like a stomach cocktail because I wouldn't let them give her any more steroid. They wanted to give her more. I said, she's already had 17 mLs. No, that's 3 teaspoons. So she had her maximum dose. And she was able to breathe, which was actually what probably saved her life, is that I had that steroid at home. And when I spoke to the daycare provider, I said, hey, what did Naima eat yesterday? She came home sick. I was at the ER all night. She said, oh, I just gave her a cookie and Go-Gurt. I said, tell me about the cookie. She said, oh, it was a cookie with little white chocolate chips. I said, no, those were macadamia nuts. And she said, oh, no, she should have told me. She said she didn't feel well. She said, yeah, she should have told me. And I thought to myself, this child is 9 years old. She should have told you. I told you they had peanut allergies. And she says, yeah, she should have told me she wasn't feeling well. And oh my. And well, just bring them back over while you go back to work. And I thought to myself, lady, you are crazy. If you think for 1 second I will ever put my children in your hands again. See, that was then. This is now. Then, when I first moved here and I had 17 days to find school and daycare for them, I made it work. That was her. I met her one day and I dropped them off the next day. I made it work. It didn't work because at the school district where they were close to my office, it was outside of her area. She had to have her brother go pick them up in his car after school. It was just chaotic every day. It didn't work. I made it work. I adjusted to it. They adjusted to it. When it was over and we left that school, we went to a different daycare provider who was in that area. That didn't work. I made it work, but it didn't work for long. They had to get out of there and go back to this lady who eventually, essentially poisoned my daughter, almost killed her, and then didn't take responsibility for it. The seasons had changed and I didn't even realize it. See, at some point when I first moved here and I had to make all these like decisions, the best, worst decisions or best, worst choices. Well, once things got a little more settled and a little better, I should have been looking to upgrade and make other choices. But it worked. Even though it didn't work, I said, okay, it's work. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. That it may not be the best route to take in certain situations. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. Right? Because it can break. If it's rickety, almost broke, replace it. Don't wait till it completely breaks down. That's like having a car that you know has mechanical issues, but you're starting a new job, so you have to go and roll with this car that's burning up gas and that you're borrowing money to keep gas in it, and you got to put oil in it every week and a half just to keep it running. Well, after a couple of paychecks and you dig yourself out of the hole, because sometimes when you go from not working to working, you're already in the deficit. Why not replace the car? Why not trade it in and upgrade? That doesn't mean you have to go get a car note that you're on the hook for 5 years for debt. No, you can still trade it in and get a car that you can pay cash for. If that car gets a trading value of $200, well, heck, put $1,000 with it and get a $1,200 car. And then do the same thing again when you're able to upgrade again. If the $1,200 car doesn't work, right? So that's what I should have done. I should have been looking for something that worked. Why wasn't I going to schools in the area where we lived in to say, hey, how you doing? Listen, we're new here. I'd like a tour of your school. I'm looking for representation. I'm looking for other black children, more than 3. It got to be 10 or more. Because if living in shared housing meant that under that law, McKinney-Vento, that I was able to send my kids to any school district, why wasn't I out looking for a better district than the one that I was in? How come, okay, the first school year, it wasn't the worst, but it wasn't the best? How come, as my daughter Naima said, how come I settled for the mediocrity? My kids weren't like super thriving and super happy and super enjoying their lives. Why wasn't I looking for another daycare provider in another school district? How come I didn't do that over the summer? Because I began to adjust to it. I normalized it. Okay, and then at the end of the school year, I just prayed for the best of the worst conditions for them. Because I had to keep going. That was then. When I first got there. It didn't apply always. That was then, this is now, knowing the difference. When the season changes, you gotta be aware. It's just like, let's say winter is coming. You don't even know. Let's say you don't know and you're looking around and all the trees, the color on the leaves have changed. They've fallen off. They're all over the ground. Well, then they start to become hard and crunchy. And when you come out your house, you notice that the grass got a little crunch to it too, like it's a little frosty if you're living on the East Coast or Midwest. And it's a little crunchy, And then you've got a little frost on your windshield. Well, that might be a signal that the seasons are changing. But if you're like, well, no, that's fine. I enjoyed summer so much. I'm going to continue to wear my flip flops, my shorts, and my tank tops. Well, that's going to be problematic after a while. Because you saw the season changing, but you did nothing to prepare. You didn't buy boots, or you bought some really cute boots. But what if you live in a place in the country where it gets slushy and it rains on top of the snow? Right? Did you buy a hat, mittens, gloves, earmuffs, heavy, nice goose down coat because it's going to get below zero? Or did you go buy new dishes for the kitchen? Do that even make sense? So you can see the season changing, but you're not preparing for it. Or even worse, as in my situation, the seasons are changing, you're in the midst of it, and you're still operating with old information. You don't even bother to get up to look. You don't even bother to get up to find an umbrella because it was sunny. Well, it was sunny, but, it didn't work for me because I worked outside in the sun all day. It was 110 degrees. I thought I was going to pass out. I didn't even have a hat. But I took the worst scenario and I made it work. I put a piece of newspaper over top of me because I couldn't afford a hat. Then you can afford a hat, but you don't buy one because the newspaper still works. That's insanity. And that's what I did as a parent of two students in a public school system that was failing them. Now, the school system, the district was not failing, but they were failing my students. And because of the necessity, I needed somebody to keep them while I worked. And because it was the best of the worst choices, the best worst, I stayed with it. I didn't even look up to change it until it was so bad that I had no choice but to move. Right? I was in my just in the nick of time moment. And let me tell you, I've been walking in reflecting during this school year. As a homeschool parent, I do a lot more reflecting than I ever did as the parent of a student who went to public school. And looking back at the year, what I could have done differently, what I did well first, always the pluses first, what I did well, and what I could have done differently. And what I realized is that in operating in that was then, this is now, and not looking at the now, but always settling for what I opted or the best, worst choice that I had then, that things are falling off left and right, like leaves falling from a tree, just falling off, right? And understanding that they're falling off because they don't work anymore. That was then. The phones that we had, they worked back then, but they didn't serve us well. They served us, but not well. Because when 2020 hit and we started homeschool and we traveled across the country, we didn't know about data plans. See, before that, we had Metro PCS, and if you went over, they would just you wouldn't be able to use any more data. You were just like, okay, you used your little data, that's it. We'll see you on data recharge date. Well, when you have a contract, they don't care about you using that data. You can use all the data you want because they're going to charge you for it. That's how we learned about data, right? And 1 gigabyte to share between two young people really didn't serve us well. You have to be under Wi-Fi and blah, 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 and all these things. Well, the contract was up last year, August. So how come in June was I not looking for a new phone provider, a new deal, better phones, upgrades, something else? Because I normalized what wasn't working. It served me, but it didn't serve me well. And so when the contract was up and the phones were paid for, it took 2 years, it was $160 a month. You would think by June I'd be counting the days down, the months till the last payment. And screw you, I can get a better deal somewhere else because I've researched it, because I found it. No, I just went to paying month to month because I didn't have to change anything. I normalized the mediocrity of it. The service that served me but didn't serve me well. It wasn't until it unfolded almost a year later, I said, I can do better than this. I'm going to let all this go. But why did it take so long? Conditioning. Conditioning to keep on doing the same things over and over again, even when they don't work, even when they don't serve you well, even when the season change and I'm late. I'm late to getting my summer clothes on. I'm still walking around in winter gear, and now it's 75 degrees outside and I got on thick sweatpants and a t-shirt. I didn't pull my summer clothes out. Or I didn't even do any summer shopping, even though I knew the season would change. And seasons changing in your life, I found, doesn't happen like how the weather changes, right? Depending on where you live in the country. I'm from Michigan, and there's supposed to be 4 seasons: winter, spring, summer, fall. Well, it's a little bit different in Michigan. Sometimes you can have winter that starts in October and goes until May. But most people who live there know that. So they live accordingly. Me, on the other hand, when it comes to life seasons can be very short, or they can be very long, or anywhere in between. But you have to be able to recognize it. There are signs, just like there are signs when the season changes in Michigan. There are signs like, oh, it's going to be they call it an Indian summer, where it's going to be extended a little bit. It's not going to be, in September, it's still going to be 75, 80 degrees. And it goes a little further until October, right? People know the signs of that. And if I don't recognize the signs that seasons are changing, something is changing. And if you look around in your life, anytime the seasons have changed, there were signs. There were signs everywhere. And so that's what I mean when I say be able to recognize when seasons change, because it will determine what you do in your life, what direction you take. Do you fortify? Do you buy? It's like if in the Midwest and in the East Coast, if they say there's a storm coming, the news, it'll show you on the news, people lined up outside to get supplies. They fortifying because we might be in for a while. Or like when COVID hit and they did shelter in place. How many people you were at the store getting last minute stuff? They said it started midnight tonight. Well, the stores were flooded with people. The highways were flooded. People going home. People going to be with family. Fortifying. Getting ready. Because, COVID, you didn't see it coming. But if you think about it, we did. They talked about it way back in November. That there was something coming this way. And there were signs. So many people got sick here. Then the number increased. There were signs. Now, keep in mind, there were some people at that very time when they first started to hear about the first people in this country getting sick, that they fortified. They saw what was coming. They paid attention. They went and they bought stuff. They bought supplies. They bought stuff to keep their house clean. They bought tissue. Of course, everybody got to buy tissue. Like you can't eat it, but okay. They bought water. They bought non-perishable items. They were set. When that first storm hit, come March of 2020, and they were saying, go home, take your kids out of school, and people were panicking and doing all that they were doing, fighting over tissue, and it's a virus. I don't see how the tissue helped, but the bleach being gone, the Clorox, the disinfectant sprays, there were people who were at home who already had that stuff because they saw what was coming. They paid attention. There were signs. And then you had those of us who didn't, who were the ones out buying all this stuff, trying to find a store that had Clorox wipes anywhere or Lysol anywhere, right? That's how it is in life. If you don't notice and recognize the signs, you're going to be knocked off your feet. Let me tell you, I am having an emotional response to not having my eyes open and not understanding and now realizing that the purpose and the reason for all these things falling off left and right, situationships, relationships, physical items, contracts, and all these other things, because you know what, that was then. It worked, or you made it work. But this is now. The season has changed. There's something different going on. And I tell you what else I realized, that when stuff starts to fall off and it's this and it's that, my home office isn't working anymore because we're outgrowing it and nobody's able to move around in certain spaces because I got my work stuff everywhere. You know why? Because it's time for an upgrade. Seasons change. That was then, it worked. Now it doesn't. It's time for an office space. That's what it's time for. And trying to continue to make something work, that was just my best, worst option. I didn't have another choice at the time. When I said, okay, I'm starting a business, I had the name of Trading Places as early as November 2018, but I didn't know what it was Trading Places. That's all I had. And then I set up an office and I started to work the idea and started to build, but I didn't know what it was. I didn't know what direction I would go in. It wasn't until December of 2019 that I knew it was Trading Places for Higher Learning. And I took it from there. And I began to homeschool my kids. And I started with a table and a whiteboard and the kitchen chairs in the living room up against a wall. That's what we started with. And now here we are 2.5, almost 3 years later, and we need an office space. That's how we've grown. See, back then, it worked because that was all I had. I had to make it work. But this is now. That was then. This is now. It doesn't work, and it's okay. That's a good thing. It's time to grow, right? It's time to upgrade. It's okay. It's a little bit scary. But as things begin to fall off around you, it is a reason for it. Because it may have worked back then. Maybe that was the only option you had and you made it work. But maybe you were supposed to start looking for other options a long time ago. Maybe there was a time when you had an opportunity to upgrade, to change that thing, when you got in a better position. But you were let me use an I statement. I was so accustomed to accepting the mediocrity of just going with the thing that I had to make it work, that I kept doing it rather than taking the time and investing in something a little bit better, rather than looking for the opportunity to do something better. See, that's the person that's on top of things when they look for the opportunity, meaning the first chance that I get, I'm going to upgrade this. And they're looking for it. They're researching it. They're planning for it. I wasn't taught that. I didn't come up, that's not my background. I came up in making it work till it don't work no more, when it wasn't even comfortable the whole time. But that's where I came from. So I'm realizing that I've been conditioned to operate that way. And that's not the way it should be. I should have had an office space a year ago. This time last year, I should have been looking for office space. Didn't even think about it. I upgraded the space in the house. I bought new stuff, bought new desks and filing cabinets and blah, blah, blah. Heck, the money I spent for that, just the money I've spent trying to maintain that all year, I could have had a whole office space for 6 months at least. At least. But I hadn't thought about it because I was accustomed to what worked at first. What I made work, that's what I do till it don't work no more. And that is my emotional response right now. That's the reason for it. As things fall off left and right, as we outgrow this space, is I don't have space for another doggone thing in here. I can't bring a book in here because I don't have space. Because I didn't think about it. I just didn't. I didn't recognize that the season had changed long ago. That it went from something cold and unfamiliar to something that was warming up, that I'm building, to something that's beautiful, that needs space to grow. It's like having a plant that you don't replant. It starts off really small and you have it in a little cute pot, and then it needs, the roots grow. It starts to bear roots and it needs a bigger pot. And then you put it in a bigger pot and you're like, okay, this'll do you. Well, guess what? Those roots are going to grow even more. It's going to need a bigger pot. I got stuck somewhere in the middle and didn't repot. Do you know what happens when you do that? The plant dies. It doesn't have room to grow and slowly it dies. Don't be that plant. Don't be that potter who should repot, that gardener who should repot that plant. Don't do that to yourself. You deserve so much more, and so do I. I've realized it. I'm going to share it with you. You deserve more. Start to look for a time when you can upgrade. You don't have to stick with something that you had to make work from the beginning. It didn't start out serving you well. You just adjusted to the way it didn't serve you. You adjusted to it. You lowered your standards. You lowered what you thought. Well, it don't work, but it's the best I can do. Well, for how long? That's that same come as you are the first time. Not continuously come as you are, right? It didn't work. That's all I can do. But for how long? For how long? So that's been my story. I was supposed to actually record this episode weeks and weeks and weeks ago. And what I found is that as things change and things begin to fall off to the left and to the right of me, and I get shaken to the core, and oh my goodness, that as I look back, I'm gonna be honest, I get sad at every time that I was supposed to look and be ready to upgrade at the first chance I got. But I just never operated that way. I always rode it till the wheels fell off. Well, that's conditioning. To do something that doesn't serve you well until it just plain doesn't serve you at all. Does it make sense? Because at some point, if you do what you gotta do, right? I gotta do what I gotta do until you can do better. Not forever. It's only until you can do better, meaning that you have to be looking for an opportunity to upgrade something. I might have to make it work today, but do I have to keep that same attitude for the next 2 years that I'm still operating in? I gotta make it works. I had to make it work, but shoot, it's still working. Well, wait a minute. It didn't work in the first place. At what point do I say, you know what? I had to make it work at first, but shoot, now that I'm able, I'm going to change this up so it really works for me. So it's a benefit. So it adds value to my situation. It adds value to my life. It adds value to our experience. It builds us up. It takes us to the next level. That's how legacies are made. That's how Apple, that's how Google, that's how Amazon. That dude didn't start in his garage, Bezos, and then say, well, I had to make it work and this is where I'm going to be forever. No, at some point he was like, okay, I done sold a couple of books. I got to get a little office space. And then he sold some more and he was like, okay, well, this space ain't big enough. I'm going to need another space and another 3 people to help me. Then he made a little bit more. Oh, boom. Now I'm going to get a big space. You understand what I mean? But because I'm a late bloomer. I'm going to say it in case anybody's thinking it. I'm a late bloomer. I figured it out a little bit late, but I'm there now. And I wanted to share it with you that was then. This is now. Be able to recognize when the seasons change. I want to thank you for tuning in. I want to thank you for coming back over and over again. To listen in and find out what's going on. I want to thank everybody who's going to our website at a Family Affair Productions LLC.com, who's checking us out. I want to thank those who are going on Amazon and purchasing our products. We're at a Family Affair Productions LLC on Amazon. You can follow our authors page and you'll see when we publish new content, new books. We've got some great stuff on there. Naima wrote a book. I love it when mommy does my hair. And Nasir wrote a book. It's okay to be afraid of the dark. They're just I'm sorry about the background noise. I got neighbors with kids, and it's midday, and this is their midday meltdown. And so they wrote little short stories. So go over there on Amazon, or you can just go to our website and check it out. Check it out. There's a link under I don't know, low content books or whatever. I think it's called Our Products or something. And you can go over there on the website and check it out. I want to thank you all. I want to thank everybody who signed up for the information session on this coming Sunday. We're going to talk about the first 5 most important steps to take as a potential homeschooler. So that's really exciting. I am prepared for that. We're going to do it through Zoom. So that's huge for us. We are moving forward and helping people one broadcast at a time, right? So I want to thank you, and I want to encourage you to come back and check out episode 8. I'm going to talk about minding your business and the importance of minding your business, and how me not minding my business almost cost me more than I could ever imagine. Thanks so much for tuning in.